Think about those things you really, really want. The passions that kind of drive you.
Yeah, those deep desires.
Right. Now, here's a thought. What if those exact things, that very enthusiasm, were actually the root of your suffering?
It sounds completely backward, doesn't it?
It really does. But that's exactly what we're digging into today on the deep dive. This really surprising link between desire and suffering, and we're drawing on some ancient wisdom here.
Yeah, and the source is fascinating. It's from Beyond Desire and Passion by Thanissaro Bhikkhu.
Okay.
And it's not just, his take on it. He's grounding it deeply in the Pali Canon.
Ah, so the earliest Buddhist texts we have.
Exactly. That gives us a really direct window into these core ideas.
Absolutely. And for you, the learner listening in, our goal is to make this, well, clear and engaging. We don't want it to feel overwhelming.
Right. Hopefully there'll be some aha moments.
Yeah, as we unpack what the Buddha actually taught about desire and passion. Like, what did those words even mean back then?
And why are they seen as a problem?
And this is the bit I find really interesting. How can desire and passion, surprisingly, actually be used?
Yeah.
Like, as tools on the path away from suffering?
It's a key point. But to really get it, we probably need a little context. What was the sort of intellectual climate like when the Buddha was teaching?
Good point. It wasn't a vacuum.
Not at all. India at that time was buzzing with different philosophical schools. You had the Orthodox Brahmins holding on to the Vedas.
Okay, the traditional religious authority.
Right. And then you had the Sammes.
Yeah.
These were more like wandering contemplatives, often questioning the whole Brahmanical system.
And the Buddha considered himself a Sammeta too.
He did, yes.
Yeah.
He used that term for himself and his followers, so he was part of that broader contemplative movement, but with his own distinct message.
So a real marketplace of ideas. And what's kind of surprising, you mentioned, is that a lot of these other teachings focused on powerlessness.
Yeah, that's striking. You might think ancient wisdom is all about taking control, but many schools argued the opposite. Either that the mind just couldn't know right from wrong.
The eel wrigglers. That's a great name.
Yeah, the Buddha's term. They basically gave up on figuring out morality. Or others argued that our actions, what we do, just don't really change anything fundamental about our happiness or the world.
So a kind of fatalism, almost, or just cosmic indifference.
Kind of. It raises huge questions about agency, doesn't it? If you think you can't know right from wrong, or your choices don't ripple outwards.
Where does that leave you?
Exactly. And some groups just believed we were powerless against fate, or maybe the will of some creator god.
But the Buddha completely flipped that idea.
Radically. His central teaching was that our intentional actions, what gets called karma, absolutely do have consequences.
Okay.
Actions coming from skillful intentions, free from greed, anger, delusion, they lead to pleasant results.
And the flip side.
Unskillful intentions, they lead to unpleasant results. So the power lies in our present intention. It shapes our experience now and later. Every choice driven by some kind of desire makes waves.
But there's nuance here, right? It's not like do bad thing, instantly feel bad.
Exactly right. The Buddha totally acknowledged that sometimes an unskillful action might feel good in the short term. Maybe you get what you wanted. But the intention behind it, if it's rooted in greed or aversion, that itself creates an inner unpleasantness. And long term, those actions tend to bring suffering.
Whereas skillful intentions are better all around.
Yeah, they're not just ethical. They come from clarity, from wisdom. They feel better inwardly, too.
Okay, so we've got this strong emphasis on intention and consequence, contrasting with ideas of powerlessness. Now, let's get into the core issue. Why are desire and passion seen as the source of suffering? The text mentions that conditionality. What's that about?
Just that conditionality, it's a really core principle. It basically says cause and effect are tightly linked, often immediately.
Right now.
Right now, when this exists, that comes to be. Or sometimes the effects unfold over time. But the cause you create now is having an effect, either immediately or setting something in motion.
Okay, so it's about the present moment's power. How does our intention, our wanting to do something, fit in?
Intention is absolutely central. It's a key player in what's called name and form. That's basically our mental Dhamma and physical Rupa experience.
Right.
Intention sits there in the name part alongside feeling, perception, attention, contact, these mental events.
Okay.
But even deeper, intention shows up earlier in the causal chain as fabrication. The Pali word is sakkara. It's right after ignorance.
Fabrication, like building something.
Exactly like building something. Sakkara is the active, intentional process of putting together our experiences, mental and physical, usually for some purpose. Think about breathing. The intention to inhale leads to the physical act.
Or speaking.
Or speaking, yeah. Even our feelings and perceptions are shaped by these underlying intentions, these fabrications.
Wow, so meditating on those is getting right to the root.
That's the idea. You're observing the very process of karma being made moment by moment.
And this fabricating leads to becoming. Bhava.
Right, and bhava happens on two levels. There's the big picture, macro level, your identity, your sense of being a person in the world. But there's also the micro level. Every fleeting thought, every tiny emotional shift, every mental world you inhabit for a moment. That's a micro becoming.
And the micro drives the macro.
That's the crucial insight, yes. These tiny moment-to-moment becomings, fueled by intention, are what constantly construct and maintain the bigger picture of who we think we are.
So if desire and passion are fueling these intentions, these fabrications, these constant little becomings, how does that connect to the Four Noble Truths and suffering?
Well, the Four Noble Truths aren't just statements to believe. They're presented as duties, things to do.
Duties, like what?
The first duty is to fully comprehend suffering. The second is to abandon its cause, and the cause is identified as tanha, craving, clinging, desire.
Okay, abandon the cause.
Third duty,
Ra.
realize the cessation of suffering. And fourth, develop the path that leads there.
And ignorance stops us from doing these duties.
Exactly. Ignorance, avijja, prevents us. We don't truly see suffering for what it is, or we don't understand where it really comes from, so we can't abandon the cause or develop the path properly.
And this ignorance is linked to these things called effluence. Asava. That sounds leaky.
Yeah, asava literally means flowing out. It was also used for alcohol, fermented stuff. So the idea is these things flow out of the mind and keep it sort of intoxicated, unclear.
Intoxicated?
By what? There are three main ones. The effluent of sensuality, wanting sense pleasures, the effluent of becoming, wanting to exist, to have an identity, and the effluent of ignorance itself.
Look, ignorance is an effluent too.
Yes, and it's not just not knowing. It can be a kind of willful not knowing, you know, a refusal to see clearly because other desires for pleasure, for identity are stronger. These effluents are seen as really deep-seated.
Deeper than just like everyday annoyances.
Oh, yeah. Deeper than the 5 hindrances people often talk about in meditation.
Yeah.
These are the fundamental outflows.
Yeah. Now, the text makes a direct link between desire, passion, and clinging, using a really simple food example. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, it's a great breakdown. Imagine you're hungry. Okay, first step, you search for food. Then you find something, you recognize it. That's edible. That's called ascertaining.
Okay, identifying it.
Right. And then desire and passion kick in. You start eating, you enjoy it, and in that enjoyment, you're clinging to the satisfaction it provides.
Ah, I see. So desire and passion are that bridge between seeing something nice and getting attached to the pleasure.
Exactly. In that specific context of seeking and consuming, they become basically the same as clinging, upadana.
And that clinging, fueled by desire, is what leads to problems, like conflict.
Yes. Because as long as we identify strongly as this separate me in a world full of things I want, there's bound to be conflict when my desires bump up against yours.
Competition for resources, for attention.
For everything. The drive to get and hold on to what we desire inevitably creates friction. The only way out of that cycle, the teachings suggest, is to loosen that tight grip on self.
That's a massive shift. But now we get to the really fascinating part, I think, the paradox. How the path isn't just about stamping out all desire, but actually using desire skillfully.
Yes, this is so important and often missed. It's not about becoming some kind of unfeeling robot.
Right.
It's about harnessing the energy of desire itself to dismantle the unskillful desires that cause the problems. Think about the 4 bases of power.
What are those?
Desire, chanda, persistence, virya, intent, stita, and analysis, vimasa. These are seen as foundations for developing concentration and insight, and they're all supported by right effort.
Right effort. That sounds key. How does desire fit into making the right effort?
Well, right effort is defined very specifically. It involves generating desire.
Generating it. Okay.
Generating desire to prevent unskillful thoughts and states from arising. Generating desire to abandon them if they have arisen. Generating desire to cultivate skillful states. And generating desire to maintain and develop those skillful states.
Wow. So desire is the engine for the whole transformation.
Right. It really is. That initial wish, I want to be free from suffering. I want to understand. That's the skillful desire that gets the whole process started.
And this applies everywhere, not just sitting on a cushion, but like being ethical.
Absolutely. Right effort underpins every part of the path. The triple training of virtue, concentration, and discernment. You need to generate the desire to give up lying, for instance, and cultivate the desire for truthful speech.
You're intentionally steering your desires.
Exactly. Towards what's beneficial, what's wholesome.
The text also talks about appropriate attention to desires and intentions. What's that mean?
Appropriate attention, yoniso manasikara, means looking closely at your desires and intentions as they arise, before you even act.
Okay, catching them early.
Yeah. And evaluating them. Is this likely to lead to harm for myself or others? It recognizes that desire is the root of intention, and intention is the start of karma.
So you have to be aware of the desire before the intention forms, ideally.
Ideally, yes. Or at least become aware of the intention before you act. This awareness allows you to learn from mistakes and choose more skillfully next time.
Which leads right into reflecting on our actions before, during, after.
Precisely. You reflect, okay, I'm about to do this. Why? What outcome do I expect?
Right.
Then, while doing it, is this causing harm? And afterwards, what actually happened? Was it beneficial?
And then you resolve to change if needed.
Yes. Based on that honest look, you make a determination. I won't do that harmful thing again. Or I will cultivate this beneficial action more. The story of Rahula, the Buddha's son, learning about truthfulness is a classic example.
He had to reflect constantly.
Constantly reflect on his actions and intentions regarding speech, and feel a sense of higher moral shame if he deviated. That shame, used skillfully, reinforces virtue.
So consistently doing this virtue, concentration, discernment, it weakens the bad desires and strengthens the good ones.
That's the process. Your inner compass gets refined. You start to see more clearly what actually leads to well-being long-term for everyone. The unskillful desires lose their appeal, and the skillful ones naturally grow stronger.
Now, the text suggests the monastic life going forth is especially good for this. Why?
It's about creating supportive conditions. Lay life has many responsibilities, distractions, things that pull your attention.
Makes sense.
The monastic life is designed to minimize those external pulls, allowing for full commitment to the training. The Buddha used analogies like a marathon runner dropping extra weight.
To run faster.
Exactly. Or comparing the freedom of the open air to a dusty, enclosed path. It's about maximizing the opportunity for practice.
And the monastic rules, the Vinaya, are a big part of that structure.
A huge part. The Vinaya, especially the core code called the Pimaka, is essentially a detailed training manual for subduing those effluent sensuality, becoming ignorance as they manifest in behavior.
Rules for everything.
From major ethical principles down to points of etiquette that help cultivate mindfulness and reduce friction, it provides a very clear framework.
But the Buddha didn't just impose these rules from day one, did he? There was a process.
Oh, very much so. It was responsive. He'd hear about some misbehavior by a monk. He'd investigate, question the monk directly. If the unskillful action was confirmed, then he'd lay down a rule, often explaining why it was necessary, what harm it prevented, what skillful quality it supported.
Practical. And for lay people, like most of us, there are the 5 precepts. How do they fit in?
The 5 precepts: not killing, stealing, engaging in sexual misconduct, lying, or taking intoxicants that cause heedlessness are the foundation for everyone.
Monks and lay people.
Both. Following them builds mindfulness, alertness, a mind free from remorse. All essential groundwork for deeper practice in concentration and wisdom. It's about creating an ethical container for your life.
The text also stresses having conviction, faith, saddha, in the Buddha's awakening. Why is that so important?
Conviction here means trusting the Buddha's core insights. That suffering exists, that it comes from craving, that it can end by ending craving, and that there's a specific path to do that.
Why is trust needed?
Because the path requires effort. Sometimes it's difficult. You need that underlying trust that it actually leads somewhere worthwhile, that liberation is possible. Without that conviction, it's hard to fully commit to the training. The Buddha, when he first taught, famously said, "Open are the doors to the deathless. Let those with ears express their faith."
Doors to the deathless. That leads us to the goal. Dispassion and unbinding or nibbana. Let's unpack dispassion first.
Viraga. It's described in really powerful ways. It's the fading away, the subduing of that intoxication we talked about. It's the end of thirst, the uprooting of attachment, breaking the cycle of rebirth, the destruction of craving. It is cessation. It is nibbana. It's seen as the supreme state beyond all conditioned things.
And unbinding the Dhamma itself. What's being unbound?
It's described as unfabricated, unconditioned, not something made or dependent on causes. The analogy of crossing the stream is helpful.
How so?
You don't get across by constantly pushing forward against the current, nor by just holding on to the bank you started from. It's a transcendence of that duality.
A release.
A profound release. And dispassion has this ethical side too. It naturally leads to virtue because you're not driven by heedless desire anymore. Even a first glimpse is said to perfect your ethics.
So it's not just a feeling, it's a fundamental change.
Definitely. Nibbana is called cessation. When the passion for fabricated things ceases, they stop causing suffering. It's considered a state, pada, not a person or being, satta.
And it exists.
The texts are adamant, it unequivocally exists, and it's described as the ultimate sukha, happiness, ease, bliss, peace, security, a refuge, something experienceable in this life.
So awakened people aren't just numb.
Not at all. They're beyond the sway of ordinary pleasure and pain, free from the fires of passion, aversion, delusion, stable, secure.
And the Buddha used his understanding of cause and effect, conditionality, to show this was actually possible.
Exactly. By showing that our experience isn't rigidly determined by the past, that intention matters now, he showed change is possible. Committing to the practice, reflecting on results that demonstrates the mind can choose a different path.
It makes it logically plausible even if you haven't experienced it.
Right. It shows it's not just wishful thinking. The real proof, of course, comes with the direct experience, that first taste of the deathless.
And this isn't something you perceive through the normal senses.
Correct. The Buddha explicitly said Nibbana isn't known through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or even the intellect in the ordinary way. It's transcendent.
And he used strong images to show how desirable it is.
Incredibly strong. Like saying you should be willing to endure being pierced by hundreds of spears every day if it guaranteed realizing the Four Noble Truths. That's how valuable even a glimpse was seen to be.
Wow. Okay, so how do we actively cultivate this dispassion? Sense restraint seems vital.
Absolutely fundamental. The image of the turtle pulling its limbs into its shell is classic.
Protecting itself.
Yes. Mindfulness, anchored in the body, acts like that shell, or like a post that the senses, likened to 6 different animals, are tied to. It stops them from just being dragged off by every pleasant sight or unpleasant sound.
Without that anchor, you get pulled around.
Easily. Into unskillful thoughts, desires, reactions. Sense restraint creates the space for choice.
Moderation in eating also comes up. Why is that important beyond just health?
It supports the practice. It's about eating enough to sustain energy, but not so much you feel sluggish or heavy, and not so little that you're constantly weak or thinking about food.
Finding the middle way.
Exactly. It prevents the discomfort of overeating and quells the persistent feeling of hunger, freeing up mental energy.
And contentment.
Yeah.
The text defines it in a specific way, doesn't it? Not just being passive.
Right. It's not just accepting whatever. It's about prioritizing your desire for awakening over chasing unnecessary comforts or status symbols that might actually hinder the path.
So it's a skillful redirection of desire again.
Yes, you're content with what's needed for the practice, letting go of desires that pull you off course.
Modesty also gets mentioned. What's the point of that?
It's about not seeking praise or recognition for your good qualities or spiritual attainments. Practicing virtue for its own sake, not for external validation.
Like the deep river being silent.
Precisely. True depth doesn't need to advertise itself.
And then there's the tough one.
Mm-hmm.
Not clinging to what's dear.
Very tough. Because, as the teaching points out, sorrow, grief, despair, they arise from our attachment to people and things we love. The story of Visakha losing her grandchildren really hits home.
So the advice is, what? Don't love anyone.
No, not at all. It's about cultivating metta, goodwill, loving kindness for all beings universally, broadening the heart rather than having these intense, narrow points of attachment that inevitably lead to pain when loss occurs.
Okay. And fear, especially when practicing alone.
The advice is to check your virtue. Reflect. Am I living ethically? Am I harming anyone? If your conscience is clear, that provides a strong inner foundation of security that helps counteract fear.
Like having nothing to hide inwardly.
Exactly. And that beautiful analogy of the wilderness tusker.
The elephant seeking solitude?
Yeah. Just as the tusker leaves the herd to escape irritation and find peace, The mind sometimes needs seclusion internal, maybe external from the noise of unskillful thoughts and desires, to allow concentration, jhana, to arise.
Okay, so jhana, concentration, is central to subduing desire. How does it work?
It starts with directing the mind. The Buddha described how he, before his awakening, consciously divided his thoughts.
Into skillful and unskillful.
Yes. Thoughts of sensuality, ill will, harmfulness, unskillful. Thoughts of renunciation, non-ill will, harmlessness, skillful. He saw where each type led and made an effort to cultivate the skillful and abandon the unskillful.
And the metaphors used martial arts, crafts.
Yeah.
Why those?
The martial ones emphasize the effort, the discipline, the need to actively combat negative tendencies. It's an inner struggle sometimes.
Right.
The craft metaphors like a cook, an archer, a turner highlight the need for skill, precision, refinement, and patient practice. You're not just bashing away, you're learning a subtle craft of mind training.
And desire fuels the persistence needed for this battle or craft.
Yes, the skillful desire for liberation fuels right effort. You want to overcome suffering, so you exert energy to attack its causes, those unskillful mental states.
And some causes need active effort, fabrications to deal with.
Right. Some things fade with equanimous observation. Others, you need to actively counter with skillful bodily actions, skillful speech, or skillful mental effort, deliberate fabrications.
Like using self-talk, verbal fabrications.
Exactly. The texts actually recommend using inner dialogue to generate skillful desires, reminding yourself, hey, being heedless is dangerous. Training brings rewards.
You can even use the desire for awakening itself.
Absolutely. Use that strong aspiration to overcome more ordinary cravings or subtle forms of conceit that might arise along the way.
And aversion can be used skillfully, too, turning away from bad thoughts.
Yes. Just like you'd turn your eyes from something unpleasant, you can learn to recognize the drawbacks of an unskillful thought and intentionally withdraw your attention, cultivate an aversion to its harmfulness.
Mindfulness seems to be the guiding principle through all this.
It's the governor. Being ardent, alert, and mindful means constantly applying that clear awareness with the specific aim of overcoming greed and distress related to the world.
It sets the standard.
It does, and it prepares the mind for concentration, helping you see what works and what doesn't, and settling the mind down.
Which leads into the jhanas, the concentration states. How do they help with desire specifically?
The jhanas involve a progressive calming and unification of the mind. The initial stages still use directed thought and evaluation to fend off distractions, including sensual desire. As you go deeper, states of intense pleasure, iti, and happiness, sukha, arise from seclusion, not from sense objects. This provides a superior alternative, making sensual desires seem less appealing.
A higher kind of happiness.
Much higher and more reliable. Then even that pleasure is refined into equanimity. It's a systematic weaning away from coarser desires by cultivating refined states. The formless attainments refine perception even further.
And breath meditation is presented as a really complete practice for this.
Very complete. Its 16 steps guide you through body, feelings, mind, and mental qualities. It uses discernment, knowing the breath, relinquishment, calming bodily fabrication, and calm, experiencing bliss.
So you see the fabrications happening.
Yes, you observe how thoughts, feelings, the breath itself are fabricated processes. You see them arise and pass away. Discernment recognizes their impermanent, stressful, not self-nature.
Which leads to letting go.
Naturally. Seeing their lack of lasting substance leads to dispassion, viraga, and relinquishment, panisaga.
The text also brings up non-objectification regarding nibbana. What's that getting at?
It points to a state beyond the usual subject-object way we frame experience. Thinking usually starts with, I am the thinker, I feel this, I see that.
Creating a me and my experience.
Right. This objectification creates separation and is a basis for clinging. Nibbana is freedom from that whole structure of self-objectification.
It's interesting that even a passion for nibbana, or the path, needs to be let go of.
Yes, because attachment is attachment. Even the highest states can have an allure, a subtle pleasure. Craving can arise and settle even there.
So how do you let go of that?
By applying the same insight. Seeing even those refined states, even the path factors themselves, as fabricated, impermanent, stressful, and ultimately not a self to cling to, that generates the final dispassion.
This refines those four determinations: discernment, truth, relinquishment, calm.
Exactly. They become so sharp that eventually you even see the need to let go of the effort itself, the striving. The mind naturally inclines towards the unfabricated. Anathapitika's dialogue is great here.
What did he say?
He explained to some wanderers how even right view, which is essential on the path, is ultimately fabricated. Understanding this leads to seeing the escape from right view itself, not by rejecting it, but by seeing its nature and letting go of clinging to it.
Wow. Okay, so what actually happens on this path to full awakening? We hear about 10 fetters.
The 10 fetters, Sayojana, are the mental chains binding us to rebirth. They get cut progressively.
What are they? Briefly.
Okay, quickly.
Oh,
1, self-identity view, believing in a permanent self. 2, doubt about the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. 3, clinging to rites and rituals, thinking they alone lead to liberation. Those first 3 are cut at stream entry.
the first stage.
Right. Then 4, sensual passion, and 5, ill will are greatly weakened for the once returner and totally cut for the non-returner.
Okay.
Then the last 5, cut only by the arahant or pause. 6, passion for form, attachment to jhana states based on form. 7, passion for formlessness, attachment to formless states. 8, conceit, subtle sense of I am. 9, restlessness. And 10, ignorance, the root.
So it's a gradual dismantling. And stream enters, they already have the right view, even if not fully skilled.
Yes, because they've had that direct glimpse of the deathless. That glimpse corrects their view fundamentally, gives them unshakable confidence in the path, even if they still have work to do on weakening desires and refining skills.
And arahants fully free, all 10 gone.
All 10 gone. For them, death is just the final stopping of the sense faculties. No more basis for rebirth or suffering.
And just to reiterate,
Yeah.
the problem isn't the world or our senses or our bodies, the aggregates.
Yeah.
It's the desire for them.
Precisely. The fault lies with the desire, the passion, the clinging. The mind actively fabricates experience based on the aggregates, driven by desire. It's the wanting that causes the trouble.
The text mentioned 2 kinds of ignorance. Can you recap those?
Yeah. One is like a failure of imagination regarding our choices. We keep doing things driven by desire, hoping for happiness, but keep getting suffering, yet we don't learn. Like hitting your head against a wall repeatedly. The deeper one is ignorance of the actual path to the deathless, to true, lasting happiness. Because we don't know or trust that path, we cling to lesser, fleeting pleasures, which blocks the way.
So the Buddha's whole approach was offering a training to overcome this ignorance and desire.
Exactly. A practical, systematic training to develop our powers of observation, our wisdom, and our ability to make skillful choices, to subdue desire and passion step by step.
And honesty and conviction are key in that process.
Absolutely. Honesty with oneself and conviction in the path and the teacher creates the right conditions for the training to work.
He wasn't just lecturing, he was actively encouraging people.
Very much so. Instructing, yes, but also urging, rousing enthusiasm, encouraging persistence. His aim was practical, helping people stop causing their own suffering. Not about gaining followers or power.
What about rebirth? He couldn't prove it scientifically, but encouraged belief in it.
He presented it as a useful working hypothesis. Acting as if rebirth is real encourages skillful action and ethical living, which is beneficial regardless. It makes the stakes higher, motivating diligent practice.
And Van. Sariputta summed up the gist of the teaching as, what again?
As simply the subduing of desire and passion for the 5 aggregates for form, feeling, perception, fabrications, consciousness. That's the core task, aimed at total freedom.
Right. So wrapping up this deep dive, we've really explored this quite radical view. Desire and passion as the root of our suffering.
But also, perhaps even more radically, the idea that skillful desire, intention, effort. These are actually crucial tools.
Yeah, they're not the enemy, necessarily. They're tools we need to learn to use wisely on the path away from suffering, towards that goal of unbinding.
What's the main thing that stands out for you from this exploration?
For me, it's really that nuance. It's not about wiping out feelings or wants. It's about deep understanding, you know? Learning to look at why we want things and skillfully guiding that energy towards liberation with wisdom and compassion.
And maybe for you, listening, you could take a moment to reflect on this in your own life. Where does clinging to desire seem to cause friction or pain?
Yeah, are there places where you could maybe experiment gently with cultivating more skillful desires, intentions that feel more aligned with deeper well-being?
If this has sparked your interest, we definitely recommend checking out the source, Beyond Desire and Passion, or exploring the Pali Canon itself. There are loads of great resources out there, many free online.
Absolutely. This journey of understanding our relationship with desire, it's a deep one, isn't it? And very personal.
It really is. Hopefully this conversation has offered some valuable food for thought, maybe a helpful perspective for your own exploration.